This is The Archive on Cinematic Sound Radio with your host, Jason Drury.
Hello again from Ramsgate in Kent, England. It's a very warm welcome back to Cinematic Sound Radio's archive Coming of Age Spectacular. I'm Jason Drury, thanking you very much again for joining us. Hello to our listeners at cinematicsound.net and through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, TuneIn, Google Play, Radio Public, and wherever you get great podcasts. It's great to have you join us once again. Now, if you're listening to us through Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, on your iPhone, on your knees, whatever, please take the time to rate and review the show. It really helps get the archive noticed and also attracts new listeners to the programme. And if you're a new listener, the archive is dedicated to new releases and new recordings of older scores from film and at times television. During this show, I will also mine the vast film music archive with our very own Cinematic Sound Radio shovel to unearth beloved favourites and forgotten gems. Now, this is part 2 of episode 21, and as at the time of recording, I myself am nearing my 50th birthday, which in fact, at time of recording, is tomorrow. So I have decided that this 2-part edition of the show will be dedicated to films which were released in 1969, the year of my birth, or at least for 13 days. And if you're still wondering whatever happened to episode 20, listen to part 1, where there is an explanation, if you haven't listened to it already. And if you haven't, yet again, I admire your rebellious attitude. Now later we have music from John Williams' wonderful score for the REIVERS from 1969, Jerry Goldsmith's oriental work for the Chairman. We round off the show with our second Elmer Bernstein score of Archive 21, his classic Academy Award nominated score for True Grit. But we started part 2 with some classic James Bond music from John Barry, with the James Bond theme, of course, composed by Monty Norman. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the 6th of the James Bond franchise or series, produced by Eon Productions and based on the 1963 novel of the same name by Ian Fleming. Following Sean Connery's decision to retire from the role of 007 after You Only Live Twice, Eon Productions selected unknown actor and model George Lazenby to play the part of James Bond, and how well that worked out, didn't it? During the making of the film, Lazenby announced that he would play the role of Bond only once, which of course turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Now in the film, Bond faces Blofeld, Telly Savalas, who is planning to hold the world ransom by the threat of sterilising the world's food supply through a group of brainwashed angels of death. Along the way, Bond meets, falls in love with, and eventually marries Contessa Teresa Davencio, played by Diana Rigg. This would be the only Bond film to be directed by Peter Hunt, who had served as film editor and second unit director on previous films in the series. Hunt, along with producers Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, decided to produce a more realistic Bond film that would follow the original novel closely. Although in its cinema release, it was not as lucrative as its predecessor, You Only Live Twice, On Her Majesty's Secret Service would still be one of the top performing films of the year. Critical reviews upon release were mixed, but the film's reputation has improved greatly over time. Now, 1969 was a good year for John Barry. After just winning his 3rd Academy Award for his score for the 12th century historical drama The Lion in Winter, and serving as music supervisor as well as composer for the acclaimed John Schlesinger film Midnight Cowboy. But his loyalty to the Bond films had no wavering, and in return the producers gave him a free hand with his music for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which would lead him to do a radical approach to the score and the nature of the title song. Come what may, Barry will deliver the goods, director Peter Hunt said years later, even if things did not work out with Lazenby. Barry agreed that the score would be more crucial than ever because of a new leading man, to make the audience forget that they didn't have Sean. So what he did was to overemphasize everything he did in the first 5 movies, and just go that little over the top to try and make the soundtrack strong. The opening theme of On Her Majesty's Secret Service also serves as an action theme, alternate to Monty Norman's classic Bond theme, following Hunt's notion of a march. But it became the most contemporary march imaginable, with a Moog synthesizer, electric brass and a tambourine providing a fast-moving rhythmic figure beneath the heroic fanfare-like melody for brass. Behind the mixing desk with John Richards was producer Phil Ramone, who had just worked with Barry on Midnight Cowboy earlier in the year and would continue to work with Barry for subsequent movies after this. Ramone was in charge of mixing the synths to the orchestra. Now, the film has plenty of action-orientated music in the score, particularly during the ski chase sequences where the main theme would serve Barry well. But the film's love story would also require a theme, and that would be the place for the film's song. Based on a key line spoken 3 times by Bond in the original Fleming book, and also the last line spoken on the aftermath of his wife's murder. Plot spoiler there, sorry. We had all the time in the world. The song, sung by Louis Armstrong in the movie, became one of the most memorable and important in the history of the Bond franchise. So here now is more music from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Original score composed and conducted by John Barry, with a James Bond theme composed by Monty Norman. music performed on Her Majesty's Secret Service, with original score composed and conducted by John Barry, with the James Bond theme composed by Monty Norman. The original soundtrack recording was last released in 2003 in expanded form by Capitol Records.
You're listening to The Archive on Cinematic Sound Radio with your host, Jason Drury.
And welcome back to this special edition of The Archive on Cinematic Sound Radio. Now, what was the great John Williams doing in 1969, I hear you ask? Well, what he was doing was sowing the seeds for the greatness that was to come with this gem of a score. The REIVERS, also known as the Yellow Wilton Flyer in the UK, starred Steve McQueen and was directed by Mark Rydell, based on the William Faulkner novel The REIVERS, A Remembrance. The supporting cast included Sharon Farrell, Robert Cross, Mitch Vogel and Burgess Meredith as the narrator. In turn-of-the-century Mississippi, an 11-year-old boy comes of age as two mischievous adult friends talk him into sneaking the family car out for a trip to Memphis and a series of adventures. In the original album notes for the score, critic Charles Beer described it as, quote, "It sounds so fresh, it's as if it were written and conducted by a fishing rod," unquote. Now, at this time, John Williams was already known in Hollywood circles for the great energy and style he brought to film music, either by his arrangements or his own scores. But the REIVERS managed to up that respect a notch further, and is an important part in his career, particularly as it was the score that first drew the attention of a young Steven Spielberg to the composer's music. To convey the rural setting of the story and the picturesque adventures of the protagonists, Williams provided the score which had the right amount of sweet innocence and evidenced great signs of originality, even when it paid homage to the great Aaron Copland. As Charles Burr noted, quote, "It's a subtle score with lots of different scenes to deal with, a lot of different subjects and emotions, from the hysteria of a horse race to the mystery of a 12-year-old boy considering in his soul what a woman is," unquote. The score will provide Williams' first Oscar nomination as a composer, and to this day is recognised as one of his most lyrical works. Working for the first time with director Mark Rydell, Williams used the complete range of his symphonic voice to come up with a score full of spontaneity, freshness and vitality, all closely mirroring the mood of the source novel and its screen adaptation. So here now is music from the REIVERS, with original score composed and conducted by John Williams. Wasn't that great? That was music from the REIVERS, with original score composed and conducted by John Williams. The original soundtrack recording, which is very hard to find but is well worth it if you can, was last released in the 90s by Legacy Records.
You're listening to The Archive on Cinematic Sound Radio.
Welcome back to the show. Now we've heard now what John Williams was doing in 1969. How about his good friend Jerry Goldsmith? well. In 1969, he scored 4 feature films and worked on the TV series Room 222. Now, one of those features would be the Chinese set spy thriller The Chairman, or, if you prefer, The Most Dangerous Man in the World, directed by J. Lee Thompson and starring Gregory Peck, Anne Hayward, Alan Dolby, Arthur Hill, and Conrad Yama. The screenplay was based on the novel by J. Richard Kennedy. An American scientist is sent to Red China to steal the formula for a newly developed agricultural enzyme. But what he is not told by his bosses is that a Michael-sized bomb has been planted in his brain, so that should the mission ever likely to fail, he can be eliminated at the push of a button. Now, Goldsmith at the time was near the end of his Fox contract period and has scored films in more or less every genre. The Chairman would be his third film with an oriental setting, the previous 2 being The Spiral Road in 1962 and The Sand Pebbles in 1966. The score was recorded in England at the Restrec Recording Studios, within the Shepperton Studio Complex, where Goldsmith scored 3 years earlier his classic score for the Blue Max. The orchestrations for the score was done by not one of his normal people like David Tamkin, Arthur Morton or Alexander Courage. British orchestrator Gary Hughes, who provided the composer with some wonderfully melodic and complicated orchestrations. The scoring sessions went well apart from part of the cue The Tour, which in the end became 2 cues pieced together, with Goldsmith taking the orchestra through 6 takes before he was satisfied. Now let's now listen to one of the most ethnic-based scores of a great composer's career. Here is music from The Chairman, with original score composed and conducted by Jerry Goldsmith. That was music from The Chairman, with original score composed and conducted by Jerry Goldsmith. The original soundtrack recording was last released on Prometheus Records. So now, sadly, we've come to the end of this second part of the special coming-of-age spectacular edition of the archive on Cinematic Sound Radio. My final segment of the show is another score from Elmer Bernstein. We had the Bridget Remagen in Part 1. Part 2 features his Academy Award-nominated score to True Grit, directed by Harry Hathaway and starring Kim Darby as Mattie Ross and John Wayne as U.S. Marshal Wooster Cogburn. It was the first film adaptation of Joe Portis' 1968 novel of the same name. This is the film that John Wayne won his only Oscar for his performance in the film, and he reprised his role for the 1975 sequel Wooster Cogburn, with whom score by Lawrence Rosenthal features in Archive 20. It does, I don't tell a lie, it does feature in Archive 20. Wait and see. The murder of her father sends a teenage tomboy, Mattie Ross Kim Darby, on a mission of justice, which involves avenging her father's death. She recruits a tough old marshal, Wooster Cogburn, John Wayne, because of his true grit and a reputation of getting the job done. The two are joined by Texas Ranger LeBeouf, played by Glenn Campbell, who is looking for the same man, Jeff Corey, for a separate murder in Texas. The odyssey takes them from Fort Smith, Arkansas, deep into the Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, to find their man. Now, to place the score by Elmer Bernstein in context, True Grit is one of those fascinating scores that takes a primary thematic idea and runs with it throughout the score. It is also the basis for the song, with words by, yet again, lyricist Don Black, who was very busy in 1969, and the theme is essentially sent through variations for different aspects of the story. The song, sung by Glenn Campbell, is part of the opening main title. The theme itself is very versatile, lending itself to hints of comedic moments, darker threats, and just following Cogburn on his journey. There is also a touching theme for Kim Darby's Mattie Ross. The most interesting aspect of the score is its often dissonant musical moments that are rather stark. Bernstein's score often feels like a cross between Copland and Rosenman at times, with some sections feeling like Leonard Bernstein. The dramatic shifts to softer material, often in woodwinds and muted trumpets, get at some of that isolation that is also part of the musical characterization of Wooster Cogburn. One of the score's highlights is the 10-minute sequence that begins with the medal fight, which appears in the suite you're about to hear. Through these 6 smaller musical segments, Bernstein is able to demonstrate shaping the final climatic scenes of the film, pulling together many of the ideas presented earlier in the score. Bernstein's 47-minute score was remastered again by our good friend Chris Malone for the limited edition release for La La Land Records, and the sound quality is excellent considering the source material, with the brass to the fore helping make this score a fascinating and at times very exciting listen. So, we end the archive coming of age spectacular with music from True Grit, with original score composed and conducted by Elmer Bernstein. The original recording, remastered by friend of the show Chris Malone, is available on La La Land Records. Thank you very much for listening. I do hope you enjoyed both parts of this special archive show featuring film music from the year of my birth, 1969. I can't believe it's 50 years. Doesn't time fly? I intend in the future to do more theme-orientated archive shows, so look out for them in 2020. But until the next time, I dig up more items for the Cinematic Sound Radio archive. More likely my previous show, which I hope you enjoyed just as much as I made it. It's true, I did make it. For me, Jason Drury, is take care and happy listening. Thank you for listening to the archive of Cinematic Sound Radio. I would like to thank Tim Burden for providing his voice on the bumpers and stingers you hear throughout the programme, David Coscina for providing the archive's intro music, and Eric Woods for letting me loose on his station. If you have any comments, questions and concerns, please email us at cinematicsound@yahoo.com. You can find us on social media at Sound Radio on Twitter and Cinematic Sound on Facebook. If you listen to us through Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to rate and review the show. It really does help get the show noticed and helps potential new listeners find the show. And don't forget to check out Cinematic Sound Radio at cinematicsound.net.